I think we need to have a conversation about the balance between self-acceptance and self-sabotage, because Leonardo is specifically curious about this question of balancing our presently dysfunctional state versus taking the action to change ourselves through inner work. Key question for the video: how can we maintain or even improve our unconditional self-love while also paradoxically having conditions of self-love which must be met in order to have self-worth? Practical example: how can we do something like giving up drink and substance and yet also having compassion for ourselves as the bumps appear on the journey? How can we set a boundary and create a structure and be very ordered and organized and intentional and disciplined, but not get critical, not become perfectionistic, not become impatient? These are some of the core questions that I deal with week in, week out in my private one-to-one work, especially when it comes to people who have very complex psyches. These are the people that have great ambitions and a hell of a lot of shame lurking in the shadows. They know what they could be, and they also know what they could be. So it's important for them to have a sense of structure, a sense of consistency, a sense of, I will not go here, and this is where I'm going towards, but we don't want it to be evil versus good. We don't want a fragmented psyche and a slippery slope towards instability. I'm going to make this a very practical video, even though there's no ultimate answer that I can give you. We're going to talk about self-love, we're going to talk about standards, and we're going to talk about the inner critic as a particular subpersonality. I wanted to be clear from the beginning that this is going to be more of a conversation and not an advice-giving session. It depends massively on which issue and which person, and also the season of that person's healing journey. Let's return to Leonardo's question before diving into the rest of the video, because it's a wonderfully well-detailed question. I'll bring out a few different elements of this. So he starts: I would love to know your thoughts on the following, slightly meta topic and potentially a further video idea. The excessively inflamed mind/ego that tries too hard, is highly impatient, and is constantly in a frustrated mental battle of improvement with itself. I'm specifically interested in the notion of finding balance, especially in the context of inner work, where one sees there is a path to healing, but tries so hard that one overdoes it and rushes it, when one is overly concerned with getting the result of the healed state, if such a thing even exists. Well, that's not what he says, but we get the idea, right? It's a wonderfully meticulously put question, and I think it represents the internal feeling of most of us when we're trying to balance between ambitious healing energy and realistic healing pace. We're all aiming towards something like the angelic healed state, which is promised by the gurus and the teachers, who radiate their loving smile as they sit there on the Zen cushion in their wonderful white robes, nodding and blissing out for the whole world to see. But we realize that in the day-to-day healing process, when we're going through waves of anxiety, maybe even repressed memories or flashbacks to old adolescent behaviors, we are far from that process. So it's a doubly difficult situation for Leonardo and anyone else who's going through this question. He mentioned this idea of the inflamed mind and the ego that wants to control the narrative. Let's work with that idea to begin with. It's wonderful that you've committed yourself to the healing journey. It's incredible that you're willing to put in the work. How do we know when you're overcharging, and how do we know when you're actually not putting in enough effort? Again, it depends on you. It depends on you as an individual and the problem that you're facing. Let's try and make it something which you can take. I'm going to go out there on a limb and just assume that the vast majority of people who are watching this video are not doing enough. And the question isn't the amount of effort that they're making towards healing, it's actually the intensity that's the real issue. They're not putting enough effort in to the healing journey in terms of actually maintaining the structure, actually maintaining the boundaries, and showing up to do the studies. So what happens is there's a psychically inflated moment. Bear with me if you're triggered. It might be you. It's definitely been me at times. What happens when you're in this very inner critic, very self-perfectionistic inner healer within that's also charged with a hell of a lot of parental voice around you need to be doing more, is that you often mentally go through the exercise of doing a lot of healing energy. Maybe you loop around on a certain idea of a certain part. Let's say it's a particular inner child wound. It's you having noticed that you get stroppy and form a little bit of an avoidant tantrum when you're in a conflict situation. You're aware of this pattern, but the healing is not the repetition on the awareness. The healing is moving through with confidence and courage and action change, which is the key element of the conditional self-love. If you've identified that you have an avoidant inner child, for example, that is always trying to wriggle his or her way out of a difficult conversation, the healing moment, the next step, is you catching yourself in that conversation with a loved one when you are trying to do the exact same thing that you would do as a scared 7-year-old. It's not sitting in your room for 5 hours journaling through the process when you've already done that once. It's learning what you need in terms of intensity, but also in terms of the sequence of healing steps. You can never know all the way along the journey. The inner child healing will look different for everyone, but let's imagine a theoretical example of healing the avoidant 7-year-old within. Once you realize that you're avoidant as an inner child, you then have the moment where you have to lean in as your conversational strategy. If your default is to lean back, you need to lean in. You start saying in conversation, "Hey, boyfriend or girlfriend, I'm noticing that I'm about to withdraw from this conversation. I don't want that to happen, but I just don't know what to say next. Would you be willing to just sit with me and hold my hand for 1 minute until I know what to say?" And if you have a conscious partner, that's a healing moment. A week later, maybe there's another disagreement. You don't even need to sit there and have that 1 minute of hand holding. You just reach out, you take their hand, you make contact, and you say, "That really upset me, and I feel scared right now. I'm actually concerned about this." Within the space of 2 weeks, you've gone from an awareness of the inner child, which is avoidant, to the middle point where you lean in, to then the reaching out and the making contact. That's a wonderful healing arc. We could imagine it gets to the point where even the triggers themselves dissolve. The crucial point is that healing is actioned. It's simultaneously a new identity, and it's also the formation of roads between the different subpersonalities. If you were to imagine your psyche as a city, there are different areas. There's like a cathedral, there's a forest, there's a public park, there's a swimming pool, and these represent different parts of your identity. The inner child may be hanging out at the swimming pool. You need to build a road down to the forest and into the central point, the council, where it doesn't overtake you. You don't become completely fixated in this kind of like playful inner child energy or the avoidant inner child energy. Once you've realized the separateness of those different psychological elements and you've started working through it, the main healing invitation for you is to continue to push it forwards. But you need to understand the tempo. Trying to bring through a lot in this video. Let's slow it down, make it really practical. I hope this lands. If you've identified that the ultimate healing pattern, for the sake of example, for your avoidant inner child is to feel secure and stable and be able to take conflict and damage and feelings of stress and feelings of anxiety without being pushed back and without overcompensating to go all the way in and become aggressive, understand that that takes months and years of actioned relationship, but don't fall into the completely unconditionally accepting idea that you should just be gentle with yourself. Yes, if it comes to your awareness that you know you need to lean in and make that hand-holding gesture with your partner in the moment of conflict, and you don't do it that first time, you catch yourself and you're like, I don't know what happened, I'm suddenly in my car driving off again. Happened again. That's okay the first time. The awareness is building. The second time, maybe you're not being courageous enough. The third time, you're definitely not doing the healing work in a way which would inspire you to keep going. The image between where you could be and what your actions actually are, they're not matching. You need a bit more of a courageous push, and it's about courage and devotion. It's not about discipline and punishment. It's about courageously making that next healing step. It's picking up the difficult book. The book for today's video is Embracing Your Inner Critic by Hal and Sidra Stone. You might get triggered at the idea of even learning more about your inner critic. This would be your next courageous step, and the second step would be implementing some of the material that you find in that book. Patient, loving, feminine style, compassionate, unconditionally accepting energy, at the beginning, but then drawing upon the healthiest masculine energy, for the sake of simplicity, let's call it masculine, which pushes the goal forwards. Your healing goal is safe, secure relationships where your inner child doesn't need to run away. The healing action is maintaining the structure and following through on the things you say you are going to do. You reach out, no matter how it feels. You know that you need to reach out in the conversation, so you put your hand out and you do it. Even if it's not perfect, that's the healing courage. How do you find the balancing point between overcharging and undercharging? You realize that what matters isn't that one success of reaching out. It's can you do that 10 times in a row? And also not overcharging to the point where you then smother someone. It's noticing yourself in between the worlds. If I were to give another example about this self-acceptance versus self-sabotage paradigm, it's very obvious when it comes to something like time management. Typically speaking, most people who are going to be watching videos like this probably spend a little bit too long on YouTube per week. I am definitely one of those people. I'd say on a daily basis, I spend at least 50% too long on YouTube. I watch a video or two more than I probably should, and I know that I have just missed out on an opportunity to do some either very productive work or deeply nourishing rest. I didn't do it perfectly, and if I didn't have a healthier relationship to my own inner critic, my inner critic might come up in that moment and say, "There you go again, wasting time, here it is, it's midnight, should have been in bed half an hour ago, what are you doing, do you really need to watch yet another gym video?" I don't speak like myself, I don't speak like that to myself, because it doesn't fit my internal language patterns. I've done enough healing work that doesn't come up. My default at that point, if even an arm crossing moment comes in, it's like, I must be avoiding something. What am I avoiding? Curiosity. Curiosity is the key. What am I avoiding? Oh, I don't want to script tomorrow's video because it's on a really dark topic and I just feel emotionally overwhelmed from the day already. I spent 7 hours in my messages. That's why I need to veg out and watch some gym videos. I want to be feeling like I'm a man who's going after something and don't need to resolve anything out there in the world. Curiosity. Curiosity was the key, but I still need to pay attention for the intensity and the frequency of those moments. 3 days in a row during a stressful period, I watch an extra half an hour of YouTube. No biggie. It doesn't matter. 1 month in a row, I realized that those cumulative half an hours, that equals something like, 300, 900 minutes. That equals 15 hours over the course of the month. 15 hours taken away from deep nourishment or deeply productive work, or maybe something else entirely. It's up to you to navigate your internal voices and know where your threshold is. If you've watched a few of my videos, you'll know that I typically have quite the desire to push. So my natural tendency is that I actually need to make time and energy to completely unwind and completely unplug, and I apply my inner critic voice towards the nourishing space. It doesn't get hostile, but it gets a bit critical. Critical at times, for example, if I've already filmed 2 videos today, this will be my second video that I filmed today. If I start going, I could film a 3rd video today, it's only 10 o'clock, I might as well film a 3rd one. My inner critic, healthily, this is a key phrase that is often ignored in the space, there can be a healthy inner critic, and the healthy inner critic can sometimes be the judge between the self-sabotage and the self-acceptance, or the self-healing and the self-avoidance. My standard, my goal, my perfectionistic inner critic metric that I weigh myself against is, can I still get my 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night so that I can show up stronger for the next day? It's not about one particular day. Sure, I may get 3 videos done if I push it in my natural tendency, or I realize that part of my healing journey is pulling it back. So my inner critic comes on with a healthy criticism, a strong, righteous voice. You need to rest. It can happen tomorrow. Strong critical energy. It's not punishing. It's not shaming. It's not name-calling. I'm not calling myself a work-addicted, overcharged moron. I'm also not inflating myself with an overly compassionate voice and saying, no, That's not something you can do. You really need to get your rest. If you don't get your rest, then what might happen tomorrow? It gets anxious. If you notice that inside yourself, sometimes the healing energy can get a little bit anxious and you get a little bit worried. It's probably not true healing energy. It's probably a bit more of an avoidant pattern. If you can find your own balances and your own central points, which again will be completely unique to you, the inner critic can become an ally. Because if you really want to evolve the inner critic archetype to the highest level, you can really call it the righteous voice of the soul. This is the same voice which tells you when you've put down the book and there's only another 100 pages left and you've got the next 3 hours free. You have literally nothing to do and you're actually quite focused. The righteous voice of your soul, the healthy inner critic, why not continue? Why not push it a little bit more? Why not see if you can read for 4 hours today? Why not see what happens? Curiosity, again, the key element of the healthy, righteous, soulful criticism, not punishment, is curiosity, an invitation, and challenge. You can challenge yourself on the healing journey, but make sure that you're not pushing yourself in a way which feels like a slave driver with the whip. And yet at other times, for certain people, they'll actually benefit from a bit of a yeah kind of moment. Different people need different things depending on the journey. Someone might need to whip themselves up out of bed temporarily with like a come on man, you can do this kind of energy, so that they can get to the gym, have the release, come back, and then be able to read or do the journaling practice or sit down in the meditation and meet their anxious avoidant 7-year-old inner child. I can't make a video which will give you all the answers. The only principles that I can possibly try and communicate, and it's something I try and communicate week on week with all the clients that I'm working with, happens typically every week. The session itself is like a how overcharged and how undercharged, and it feels like we're always doing the limbo between the scales rising and the scales falling. But when I'm working with someone one-to-one on specific issues, usually 4 or 5 main issues over the course of 4 months, I can see where the levers are at. I can see where things need to be pulled down or pulled up and organized and wrapped together. And it's easy when you're having a one-to-one relationship because you know who they are as an individual person. When you know who you are as an individual person, you can apply the same principle and truly find the healthy balance. It will be a case of generally challenging yourself with curiosity to go a little bit harder, a little bit more devoted. Discipline, very masculine word, fantastic. Some people will resonate with that. If you want a more soulful word, devotion. Devotion to the healing path means maintaining the lane, showing up and doing the work, reading books like Embracing Your Inner Critic, and having the devotion and the courage and the structure that when you notice a certain moment happening, you materialize your healing impulse, you concretize that healing intention, and you don't say the thing which is aggressive, or you say the thing which is vulnerable and scary. That requires a push. That requires something which isn't natural, because natural is often wrapped up in trauma, and we can sometimes get caught up in these ideas of, oh, that's what my gut tells me, or that's what feels natural for me. And actually it's just a bit of unresolved trauma or an old defense pattern which is keeping you small. At other times it might be exactly what's natural for you. This is the endless challenge of a video like this. I hope that I've communicated the core principle. You are the one to decide your balance, but generally speaking, at this stage in your life, I'd lean towards a little bit more challenge. I'd lean towards a little bit more intensity, because you might as well reduce the healing arc and enjoy the decades of mental health on the other side of this than prolonging it into states which usually end up as extra time on YouTube or time scrolling on the phone or maybe a destructive habit or two. You might as well intensify, but as you're intensifying, know that it comes from a healthy, strong, ambitious energy, ambitious healing energy, an energy of, I deserve better than this. I'm going to heal myself. This sickness isn't for me. This way of existing isn't for me. I love myself and I'm going to do better. That's a strong, inspiring energy. And if it starts to add little phrases, little punishments, little criticisms, little bullying remarks there, know how to separate the two from the healthy inner critic and the unhealthy inner critic, and go through the active imaginations and the parts work and the subpersonality integration to figure out exactly where that line is for you as an individual, Some people need very soft language. Other people, usually men, usually young men especially, they need a really strong kind of driving energy because we're all different. I've given all the examples I can give. I hope this is useful. Please leave a comment in the comment section if you want more expansions in one direction or another. This series is only possible with people like yourself getting involved, so thank you for your attention, and I will see you right on over on the next video where we're going to keep the conversation going.